please say aye. Aye. To the contrary? Carried. Okay, we're going to move to something which is quite exciting now, which is item 15, the Auckland Future Fund. This item is the first progress update on the establishment of the Auckland Future Fund. I'd like to acknowledge Councillor Fletcher and the leadership she has shown since we agreed to establish the fund. I know that Ross and John and team are here to update it, but I'll ask Councillor Fletcher if she presumably should want to move this, and would you like to have a few words first, Councillor Fletcher?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I would. In moving it, sorry, I'm just bringing it up here now. Today is an important day, as we debated earlier, but from my perspective, this is probably the most important and enduring measures that we have taken since the formation of the Auckland Council. The development of the Auckland Future Fund will be something that will live on beyond our time sitting at this council. There was a comprehensive report that was put and supported at the Performance and CEO Performance and Appointments Committee earlier this week on Tuesday, I think it was. And I can't talk to the appointment of the directors, but what I can tell you is that we have been working at pace. Normally a fund of this kind would take about 18 months to set up from woe to go. And since you gave us the agreement to work on this, and it's not a straightforward matter, and it's important that it's done with integrity, and I am constantly cautioning the officers not to get too far ahead of themselves, because we really want for this, the framework for this, to be enduring. I think at the beginning of next week we will be in a position to be able to announce the directors that we have and the chair of this as a CCO, and they are people with the considerable skills that are required. So while you'll hear from the officers today the diligent work that they have been undertaking to ensure that when the directors are appointed that they can act with some speed, it's still, these are going to be decisions that they will have to be accountable for. So in terms of governance and management, we've been very clear to keep a very good distinction. As you know, the fund will be initially capitalised by the sale by the Auckland International Airport shares. But I think if we are successful, this will become an incredible vehicle for the future for ensuring the resilience and the financial sustainability for the Auckland Council. And I think it's going to do a lot in terms of the credibility that we will have with governments, into the future. I was interested earlier this week to hear Chris Bishop talking about the need for having a sort of bipartisan approach to infrastructure planning, and really I couldn't have agreed more. When we look to other international cities, I've been envious of the fact that they have had funds such as we are developing now, but also that they've had a degree of agreement on what infrastructure is going to be required going forward. So it gives us a greater sense of certainty, but we can't just take at face value all of the assumptions that we've made. I'm sure that the directors, when they're appointed, will push back on us and may challenge some of these assumptions. But what I can give you the assurance is that every detail has been considered most carefully, and I think the officers will refer to the fact that we've been well assisted by Simon Allen as we have worked our way through here. May I just thank a couple of people. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Mayor for being willing to entertain this as a proposal. From the beginning, when it was suggested that that we could be looking at dealing more effectively with the asset base that we had, he was very supportive, and to that end, I don't think it would have progressed without Max Hardy, and it's good that Max is here with us today, and his successor in the role in the Mayor's office, Jazz Singh, has been amazing, and it's been really good working. Phil's not here, but I do want to acknowledge Phil and all of the officers that have worked on this. But if you think that we're sort of there, we're not quite there yet. It reminds me of my grandchildren when we're trying to drive down to the beach. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? We're not there yet, but what I can give you the assurance of is that every detail is being considered with great care, and you will hear the preparatory work now from the officers that have been undertaken, but ultimately it will be the quality of the directors that we have appointed that will really determine the profitability of this for the future and the opportunities that it will present. So with much thanks to everyone who has been involved, I want to hand it back to you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. So I've just got a couple of slides here just to explain, what's in the report in terms of that preparatory work that we've been doing. There's two key parts really. One is for the funds to work. There's some certain legal structural things that have to be put in place. We need to have a company that we can appoint directors to, and we could create the legal framework for them to do their role. So certain steps that we have to do. And then there's certain things that can only happen once they've been appointed. So you've got to kind of this legal set the structure up, and then that will allow the directors to perform their role in accordance with that structure. The second bit is a whole lot of preparatory work that we're doing to really help the directors make some key decisions. And that includes a bunch of advice, options. We've run some procurement processes, gathering up proposals. We will shortlist them. So that's not about us making decisions. That's about us gathering up all this information, giving them options and choices. The directors will have a bit of a monster agenda at their first board meeting. We're going to give them lots of advice, but they're going to have to make quite a few key decisions to get this set up right. So firstly, I'll just do a bit of a recap on the structure, if this will work. So this is the structure that's been set up. I'll just recap how this works. This is a slide that we presented when we made the LTP decisions, but it's kind of useful just so you understand how the pieces fit together. So the top layer is strategic governance, and that's your role. That includes the work to make the decision, to create the future fund, to run that process of recruiting and appointing the directors, and setting the key policies that are in the LTP, and that's the AFF policy, distribution policy, what to do with airport shares, etc. And so that was all largely done through the LTP and the decisions that you made at the end of June. So that bit's done, and Councillor Fletcher spoke about that, the director recruitment process. The next layer is the fund itself, and in a legal sense there's two bits to that. There's the Auckland Future Fund Trust, so that is a legal trust structure that will own the assets of the fund, and then there's a company that sits alongside that. That's the Auckland Future Fund Trustee Limited. So that is the company, that is what the directors will be appointed. There'll be 3 directors appointed to the board of that company, and they will basically be the trustees. They'll be the directors making the key decisions. So that entity will, there's the Auckland Future Fund Trust, that will be a substantive CCO. It owns some important assets for the council. So that means it has to have a statement of intent. It'll have to report on performance back to yourselves. It'll have to make there'll be some key things that it has to involve. One is the statement of the SIPO, the Statement of Investment Policies and Objectives. There's a key thing that they will do, which sort of sets the strategy for their investment activities. And then the bottom layer is the nuts and bolts, the operations. So there's 3 bits to that. One is fund administrator, who does the work, who writes report, who organises meetings, etc. And now what we'll propose is that council staff do that, provide that as a service to the directors on on the basis that's the simplest and cheapest way to do it. But it'll be the director's choice about how they want to resource their administrative activities. There will be a key decision that the directors will have to make in terms of appointing an investment manager, and that will be the key people that give them the advice around what to invest in, how do they invest, when do they invest, those kind of things. And then you've got the execution, the fund managers, and that is the people doing the actual nuts and bolts investment. So professional fund managers, along the lines of what you might think about in terms of, for KiwiSaver, those are the funds that you'd invest into. So that's kind of the structure of what we're trying to set up. Some bits of that, the legal bits are in place, or will be in place once the directors are appointed, and that first bubble talks about setting up those legal and governance frameworks. So it's about appointing the directors, incorporating the trustee company. So that company can't be appointed until it's got some directors, must have the directors, and then you can create the company. And then one of the first thing that the directors will have to do is execute a trust deed, and that then sort of sets up the legal framework for the trust to operate. So those things are well in hand. They're all kind of procedural things, but they legally have to happen before the trustees can do their job and start making decisions. The next bubble there is around that, is the work that we've been doing to help prepare the directors to make some key decisions. So there's three bits to that. One is what I just spoke about in terms of how the administration will work. So we'll put a proposal to say, John and team will provide some services to administer the fund in terms of minutes and advice and admin support, and they can make a decision. They can accept that or not. The next bit is a bunch of key governance documents. So there's that SIPO, the Statement of Investment Policies and Objectives, will be a key thing, and the Statement of Intent. So we're working away on drafting a Statement of Intent. It's a starting point. It'll be for the directors to review that and say, is that the statement that they want to intend, the Statement of Intent they want to provide to you and submit through to you, just like you do with any other CCO. But we'll give them a starting point, and that they can take it from there. The SIPO, we are having a go at drafting that as much as we can. We're getting a little bit of external advice to help us with that. We think some of that, there's decisions that you've made in terms of the LTP, in terms of how much growth investment, the returns that you're seeking. So some of that, some just best practice around what those things normally look like. We think we can kind of complete about 75% of that content based on what we know and what best practice looks like. But the last 25% requires a higher degree of professional judgment. How much risk should the funds take? What's the right mix of asset classes? And that is kind of where the directors earn their money. That's the key bits they'll need to do. So we'll get that progressed as much as we can, and we'll hand it over to them and go, we need you to exercise your professional judgment around the SIPO and take that thing through to completion. So those are the key governance documents. The next bit is around some key appointments, and this is where we're running some requests for proposal processes. So there's two key ones there. One of them is the investment manager. So this will be that, this will be a key advisor for the future fund. This will be given the statement of investment, given the SIPO, given the decisions that the directors are making around how they should invest the money, the investment managers will say, well, which fund should we select, when do we invest, how much goes where, and then they will report against that performance. So that they will be the advisors and the directors will be the decision makers. So we've run a process. We're now kind of reviewing those things, and we'll shortlist that. We will give the directors at the first meeting, here is a bunch of proposals. Here's our view on some of the investment managers, and you tell us which one of those you would like to appoint to be your key advisor to support them in their key decision making around the investment side of things. The other element is around the airport share transaction. So it will be up to the directors to decide if and when and how to sell the airport shares that we transferred into the fund. We've run a process to get an execution advisor. We're making sure that is someone that is independent. They won't have any stake in terms of the actual transaction itself. They will work with brokers to do that, but this will be basically a fixed fee. So again, we've run a contestable process. We've got some proposals. we will shortlist and make recommendations, but it'll be entirely up to the directors to decide, which advisors they want to go with in terms of advising them on what to do with the airport shares. So those are the key bits, the legal setup, and then supporting directors with the key decisions. There's some other things that has gone on as well, kind of separate to the work of the directors. There is the work that has gone into the progressing the legislative protection. We shared with you back in June a draft of what that bill might look like. There's been a little bit of extra work to refine the trust deed and the draft bill. The two need to work hand in hand, and we've got some external legal advice around tweaks, refinements, just to get those protections as strong as they possibly can be. The legislative protection, the draft bill is now with Parliamentary Services and is in that process. So that's kind of out of our hands now. We can't, we've progressed it as much as we can. It's now the machinery of Parliament to work that through a process. Then there was a couple of other policies. There is a significance and engagement policy, because you've made the decision through the LTP for the Auckland Future Fund to be designated a strategic asset. We've got to update the significance and engagement policy. That has been done or will be done very shortly, and we'll update and publish a revised significance engagement policy that just makes it clear the Future Fund is a strategic asset. It's a pretty straightforward activity. Then the last one was a responsible investment policy. So in June, you looked at a draft investment policy. You agreed that you agreed to adopt that policy for now, but you did want to take the opportunity to workshop that again. So once the directors are appointed, they will have a look at it, give some advice, and we'll have a workshop in due course. So we'll go back and have another look at that, look at the investment, the responsible investment policy. So some of that speaks to what are some exclusions, what things should the fund invest in or not invest in, to make sure it's a socially responsible investment fund. So that is kind of what the report covers. It just provides an update of those things, and really just asks you to note the progress with all of the setup work that we've been doing and the preparatory work, and note that progress in terms of the legislative protection work. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Newman has a question.
Good afternoon. I've been pretty quiet today, but I just wanted to I wanted to ask you, so we're about to announce the appointment of directors. What happens if those directors don't necessarily like the fund manager options you provided, and they say, well, none of the above, this is who we prefer? We support the appointment of the directors, and we want to empower the directors. They might want something different to the shortlist that you provide. So what happens then?
Yeah, through you, Chair. I mean, it's the ultimate responsibility of the directors to make that call. So if they don't like the shortlist or the RFP process, they can start their own process.
I think we just make sure they follow a good procurement process, but other than that, it's their decision.
Okay, and you would be presumably providing urgent advice back to us that actually the directors are, just basically want to have a slight variation to what was initially mooted by the officers, and so we'll provide that as an update to the committee of the whole.
Yes, I mean, we've had a lot of interest. We have a short list, we have a long list. There's plenty of options there, and if none of those are suitable, they could direct us to undertake another procurement process. Those are all options for them. If they start again, it'll just take longer to get things done.
And I presume that also includes the independent professional advice with respect to any sell down option. I mean, there's the investment manager shortlist, and then there's also the independent advice in relation to any divestment.
That's completely correct. Same approach.
Questions, good answers. Deputy Mayor Simpson, please.
Well, thank you, and well done. My question is about sort of the long-term reporting to the governing body. Could you just confirm whether the 3 new appointees will come in person to talk to us, or will it be a written report, or how will we get that information provided to us?
Yes. Through you, Chair, I mean, as a CCO, they'll report through that committee process, but also the financial performance and results will be included as part of the normal reporting which comes back to the governing body, such as in the quarterly performance report.
Just because there's only three of them, I just wondered, is there an expectation, I'm sorry I wasn't part of the appointments process, but is there an expectation that we will meet them and talk to them or not?
I would have thought it would be just like any other CCO where the chair would front various meetings, yes.
Thank you for that. Councillor Turner, please.
So I'm too dopey to invest my own money, but I am considered bright enough to choose the person who's going to invest for us. Is that what we're saying here? This is a kind of a fundamental flaw in the process, isn't it? Well, I just know. I know that's why we're doing it, but am I hearing this right? We get the final choice of who those advisors are.
So through you, Chair, so the advisors, such as the investment manager, for example, that'll be a decision for the directors of the
Okay,
trust.
thank you. I heard you wrong. Thank you.
You did right. We're too stupid to do that. They're going to do that because that's why they're clever about it. And they've convinced us that they're pretty clever, including, I forgot to mention that David Taipari sat through these on behalf of the Independent Marriage Statutory Board, and he provided a very helpful and financially literate support to us. Councillor Lee.
I heard Councillor Fletcher's comments at the start of this item, in which he seems to believe that the future fund will be an enduring entity, perhaps even intergenerational. Is there any definition of the timeline of what the council means by future? Is it intergenerational? Is it 10 years as per local government long-term plans? Or is it not defined? What do we mean when we tell the people of Auckland we are setting up a future fund? What does it really mean? Any definition?
Through you, Chair, I mean, I would take the future fund and what's been said about it to be intergenerational. That's been the concepts which we've sort of used.
Where is that defined? Because if it's not, it needs to be. I'll leave it at that.
Good point. I think it is definitely intergenerational, and how that'll be done will be worked out. I think it's partially in the piece of legislation which is going to Parliament.
Can I ask a supplementary, Mr. Mayor?
Of course you can.
Okay. In the report, we have clause 5. Any decisions about selling Auckland Airport shares and investing the proceeds will be made by the directors with assistance from professional advisors appointed by the directors. There is no set timeline for this to take place. So that's one clause. And then I go down to 29 and I see the fund will initially be capitalised with council's remaining shareholding in Auckland International Airport Limited. The LTP provides for the council to transfer its shareholding in AIAL into the fund and the subsequent sale of AIAL shares by the trustee to achieve the purposes of the fund. So this is much more deterministic language, that this sale of airport shares, as recommended by the reputable Australian consultants, Flagstaff, if I recall, it seems to have a deterministic aspect to it. Will it be up to the directors, or is it up to the politicians and managers of Auckland Council that these shares be sold? Which is it? Because it's confusing.
So the paragraph 29 talks about the LTP providing for the council to transfer the shares into the fund and subsequent sale. So that's enabled so provide for means it is enabled by the LTP. So those are the decisions you made through the LTP to transfer the airport shares into the fund, and then that is then within the decisions are made, policies are set in the LTP to enable the shares to be sold. So the decision about how and when and through what process to sell will sit with the directors of that fund. We've been really clear through the consultation that in setting up the fund, the policy parameters, the intention is to have a diversified fund, have diversification, and so it is almost certain that some or all of the shares will be sold. So we've been pretty clear that the intention is to transfer these funds into transfer the shares into a fund for them to be sold. That's sort of the clear intention, but it is up to the directors to have that final decision about execution.
So it's up. So how and when is up to the directors and their specialist advisors. But if it's not up to them at all, it's up to the instructions from the council and its managers. Is that right? Have I got that right?
So through the LTP and the decisions made in June, you've decided to set up a future fund, transfer the airport shares into that, and set policies that require the future fund directors to run a diversified portfolio. So the practical consequence of that is that they would have to sell, most, if not all, of the shares in order to achieve those objectives that has been set for them.
So they have to, just one more point, if I could, and that's clause 38. In 27th of June 2024, the governing body adopted the Auckland Future Fund policy. The policy states that the council considers that the fund as a whole is a strategic asset, not necessarily its component parts, is a strategic asset for the purposes of the Local Government Act 2002 and will treat it as such for the purposes of the significance and engagement policy. Was that not the status for many, many, many years preceding the advent of the Auckland Council? Was that not the status under the Local Government Act of the Auckland International Airport shares themselves until 30th of June 2023? Is that right?
So the Local Government Act defines that any airport shares owned by a local authority are deemed to be strategic assets, regardless of what you say in the significant engagement policy. So to any shares that are held, by the council are strategic assets. If the shares are owned, through a trust, then that no longer applies. The decision to call the future fund, to deem the future fund a strategic asset, means that those LGA protections around consultation, LTP amendments, etc., means that the value of the fund is protected. It means that the protections around strategic assets apply, and that you couldn't, dissolve the fund and spend it on something else without going through those statutory protections. That is one of the layers of protection for the fund. There are other layers in terms of the trust deed and the legislation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Watson has a question.
My question just goes to point 32, which I think is just an elaboration of 6(v)(1), and that's this the successful advisors who would be expected to provide independent advice on the transaction process, analysis, about execution, etc., etc. So that advisor will be performing exactly the same role that Flagstaff did for the first tranche of airport shares, won't they?
Yes, that is correct. Okay. They will give that advice around how to execute a sale, and they won't be incentivised. They won't get a cut. They'll get basically a fixed fee. They won't be incentivised to get cuts depending on what outcome is achieved in terms of the sale.
Right. So that fixed fee with Flagstaff was, roughly 1.5 million, 1.425 million. So we would expect that to be the same sort of process. we'd be expecting that to be another 1.5 million then for that advice, given that it's a repetition of what's already occurred.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So there's a process underway at the moment. I think, as Ross mentioned, there's that process being undertaken, and we've received and are going to formulate a shortlist for the directors to make a decision on that, and that will include information about the fee structures, which they'll make a determination on.
I guess my point is it wasn't that long ago that happened. You wouldn't expect there to be too much movement then if we got a reasonable deal the first time round, would you?
Through you, Chair, again, I haven't seen the pricing details which have come back through the AFP, so I can't really comment on that.
So as far as some of these other costs go, point 48 financial implications, the ongoing operational budget set at 400,000 a year, is that made up largely of the directors and the fund managers' wages? Or is that something else?
Through you, Chair, so the ongoing operational budget is designed to cover the director fees, also a service fee that they pay council or another provider for administration support, and then ad hoc costs such as the auditor, any other sort of ad hoc legal advice they might want, etc.
Okay, so the fund manager is additional to that? That's another arrangement?
Through you, Chair, so how, if you remember back to the modelling, I think we allowed about 40 basis points, which would reflect the costs of investment and fund managers.
So we've set them a target return to achieve after fees, and so their fee is part of the fees, and they will need to they'll need to earn a certain return after fees that covers that.
Yeah. Okay. Just one final question, if I mind. So in the negotiation of the current advice, and is that going to include an allowance for expenses in the contract? Is that going to be covered off in a similar fashion as was previously the case with Flagstaff?
Through you, Chair, again, look, we're going through that process now, and again, that ultimate contract will be the responsibility of the directors, and we'd expect them to follow council guidelines and practice.
So the same then.
Again, through you, Chair, that's a decision for the directors, not for me.
Thank you for that. Councillor Philippine, please.
Thank you, Chair, and tēnā kōrua, Ross and John. Look, I want to get a clarification first around Councillor Watson and 400,000. I think he was talking about the operation cost of, that's how much it's going to be, is about 400,000?
Through you, Chair, yep, that's correct. That's what's been allowed in the budget.
And just confirm, to set up the fund is about 500,000, I've been told, so I just want to confirm that.
Through you, Chair, I think we allowed a total of 700,000, which will include a portion of first year operating costs as well. So set-up costs are sort of in that magnitude. That's probably about right.
Okay, between 500 and 700, and then the 400 OPEX.
Yeah, so just to clarify, okay. 700,000 in the first financial year,
yep,
and then 400,000 each financial year ongoing from that point in time.
Thank you. Just got two more, or three more. Very quickly, if I've been trying to have a look at the notes that with the agendas we've had around the future fund. Can you tell me, for the investment returns, I think there was a percentage that was given to the governing body. I think it was about 7% return. Can I just confirm that it was about 7.3, I think, or 7.5 return?
Yeah, through you, Chair, from memory, it was a gross return of 7.64, then allowing 40 points for investment manager fees, fund manager fees, etc. That gave a net return of 7.24%. That was the estimated long-term return.
And can you confirm, and I've asked this question maybe twice, but I just want to get confirmation that there will be no borrowing from debt if we don't achieve the 7.24% net? I've asked that question before, and I was told there could be if we got less, but I just want to confirm that that there's going to be no borrowings if we have a bad year or whatever, and we don't achieve what we've indicated. I was given that there be no borrowing of debt just to achieve what. Yeah. So.
Through the chair, the idea for the first 3 years at least is that return of effectively a return of 5.24%, which is your 7.24 minus allowance for inflation to keep the fund real, would be returned to council, and that return will be provided independent of the actual return from the fund. So this fund will be volatile. In some years it'll make more than 7.24%, and other years it'll make less. But what the directors will be asked to focus on, and that's through the Auckland Future Fund policy and the Auckland Future Fund distribution policy, is a view of the long-term performance of the fund.
So is that no?
So debt will not be borrowed.
Sorry?
There won't be debt used to pay for that return.
So you won't be borrowing from debt just if you have a bad year. Okay,
that's correct.
Cool. Last one is, if you have a look at number 50 on our agenda papers, and it's got my question is, under 50, how much are we looking at with the dividend that is still to be received from AIAL? Because under risks and mitigation, it's got fund will not match the budget amount included in the first year of the LTP. However, this will be partially offset by the additional dividend income that is likely to be received by AIAL. How much will we end up getting, and what amount do we have left that could come from airport?
Yeah, through you, Chair, just very
Sorry,
roughly, I mean, the dividend just declared, I think, was 6.5 cents per share. And based on our shareholding, very ballpark, that would give us dividend income of around 10-ish million, I believe. It's very approximate.
I mean, just to add to that, so the advice we're going, what's the budget, the projections in the LTP is that by investing in the future fund rather than the dividends from the airport, it's about a 40 million per annum benefit. So it's an extra 40 million benefit per annum, and for the first 6 months there will be sort of 20 million per annum. If there's a delay in setting up the fund and achieving returns in the first year, we would. If we were to hold on to the airport, if the airport shares were retained for longer and not invested in the fund, it would, you get 20 million less in the first year and it'd be 40 million thereafter.
Okay, and Mr. Mayor, just supplementary. So, Ross, based on what you've said, when we end up taking the shares and saying, hey, we're going to sell them, how much dividend do we have left before we make that decision if there is no delays? Because once we end up telling the airport we're out of here now and we're going to sell them, put them into the Auckland Future Fund, at what stage will that happen? And if there's no delays, just let us know that. I just want to find out when everything's done, dusted, no more dividend, it goes into the future fund.
Look, through you, Chair, that's not something we can answer because that's a decision for the directors to make once they're appointed. They will make a view on, as Ross said, if and when to sell, and the timing of that is up to them, and whether the stock has gone ex-dividend or not will determine whether we get the dividend which has been announced or not.
Killed up.
Right, well, that's the last of the questions, but and whilst you guys are withdrawing, I have to have a mover and a seconder to go for an extension of time. Beg your pardon? Reluctantly, the two ladies on my left will move and second that. All those who approve an extension of time, please. Carried with no acclamation whatsoever, but thank you. Right. Now we're going to have a debate about this. Does anyone want to offer any important issues towards this? Councillor Lee wishes to say something. Thank you, Councillor Lee.
I'll lead off, Mr Mayor. I'll just come back to Councillor Fletcher's speech, which introduced the item, and her vision of an enduring, what seemed to be an intergenerational fund, and how great that would be. There's no guarantee, unfortunately, that is the case, and some of us around the table have been around long enough to remember similar sentiments expressed by the likes of Sir Barry Curtis in regard, ironically enough, to the shares of the Auckland International Airport, and even, indeed, our founding mayor, Len Brown, about those airport shares, how proud they were, handed down from previous generations, and how much value they provide for Aucklanders, and how they will be handed on to the future. But there's no guarantee of that, unfortunately. I'm also reminded of what happened to the diversified fund assets, which also was a legacy asset handed down directly from the Auckland Regional Council to this council, and managed very astutely by Simon Allen and Auckland Council Investments Limited, and then taken over by Auckland Council Treasury, the finance section, and liquidated within a matter of months, essentially. And that I recall the arguments made around the room. Some people here will remember them because they made them, about how this wasn't needed, this fund wasn't needed, that it was a rainy day fund, and 2017, believe it or not, was actually a rainy day. But anyway, I could now managers, the same manager, similar, how can I say it? A number of names appear on the reports recommending the sale of the Diversified Asset Fund, how it wasn't needed, and so on and so forth. And similar names are now recommending this future fund, which is the future. How long it is not defined. I could be unkind and suggest that these people are being inconsistent, but anyone can change their minds. However, there is some consistency here all through this, and that is the sale of public assets. This is an investment fund predicated on selling a really good legacy investment, a blue chip investment, to enable directors to invest and speculate on other assets. How enduring that will be, Lord only knows. But if you talk to economists, a lot of them are very concerned about the American market and the $33 trillion deficit in the American budget, and fear that one day, sooner or later, there's going to be some sort of correction. And if the American market sneezes, we get the equivalent of COVID down here in New Zealand. So I'm very disappointed that we are throwing away an asset, a good income earning asset, for the sake of this future fund. So, but I talked about consistency and inconsistency, and I can see both at play here, but talking about inconsistency, we were told we had to sell the airport shares last year to not pay down debt really, but to slow the accumulation of debt, because we hadn't tackled the fundamentals that causes this debt. Now we don't even think about that at all. This is for a future fund. I have to say I am not convinced. I am not convinced that the reasoning here is especially sensible. I am concerned that this fund will become a hostage to fortune, and it will, rather than be making money, will be making less money in terms of the cost of this future fund and its directors and consultants and all the rest of it. You can just imagine he'll be battening on. That rather than a future fund, we are creating essentially a slush fund, and unfortunately this is not likely to be an enduring asset for the people of Auckland, rather the opposite. So I have to say I will be voting against the recommendations. Thank you.
Councillor Stewart, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I've always been a supporter of the airport shares, but in light of the facts that have come through, Auckland Airport share price on the 19th of May 2023, they were $8.89. The share price today is $7.46. That's a $1.43 drop, or 16.1% drop. And in May last year, we owned 2.2 billion, and now it's 16.1% of the 22 billion is now 344 million drop. So I think we did the right thing, and it was a really hard decision for me when I supported the selling of the airport shares, but I believe that we did the right thing.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's minus $340 million or something or other for a year. We should have done it sooner. Councillor Sayers, please.
Thank you. Just a reflection, the Auckland Council never had control over the airport. You need at least 52% shareholding to do that, and 20% to have a director. So, and the council only had 11% of those shares. So it was really only there for financial return. We didn't control the airport. So I don't really think that we are selling the public silver. Airport dividends were 1.4% per annum. The Auckland Future Fund cash contribution is expected to be 400 million more than the projected dividend from the airport shares over the next 10 years. So that equates to, $40 million savings a year, which avoids a 4% rates increase each year. And the ratepayers were only getting 1.4% dividend return from those shares. I mean, you could get better by putting in the savings account in the bank. I believe we put in ample and multiple protections to prevent this fund ever being raided for purposes other than what it was intended for. And importantly, compared to the ease by which the council has continuously kept raiding and selling those shares, the Auckland Future Fund is significantly more secure. The council won't be managing those funds, be managed by experts, just like you would if with your own superannuation fund. Give it with them and get the best return you can. So I'll be supporting this recommendation.
Thank you for that. I've got a couple more discussions, but we are actually, this is a progress report on it. We have made the decision to do it. So there's no point in revisiting that, but I've got a couple more comments about, we are discussing what's in front of us, please. Councillor Filipina.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to say anything, but then when I heard Councillor Sayers talk about we didn't have enough percentage to influence and everything else, please read an article from Liam Dan going back to 2007 when we stopped the takeover from a Canadian pension fund because we ended up working with others that had a big stake. So that was the issue when we ended up prior to the funds going into Auckland City Council. So I just wanted to point that out. Just have a look at the article. It's actually quite a good one because it points out that for us working together with others who had a big stake, we stopped it. So just wanted to point that out. But Chair, The reason I'm sort of taking up this call is really about the 20 million, and I mentioned that to you and the CEO about the 20 million that 2 legacy councils are going to receive. And my comment then, and it's still the same with the 2 local boards at South, it was a slap in the face in regards to the 20 million. I'm just going to give you some stats as to why. Because I pulled some stats from MSD, the Territorial Authority Areas, and in 2009, prior to the amalgamation, the population of Auckland City Council was 440,100, and Manukau City Council 368,600 people. They were in the 2 TLAs in Auckland, and at the time, they were the 2 largest TLAs in New Zealand. There's 20 million that needs to be split amongst those people. So, Mr. Mayor, as you indicated, I remember when I sort of brought that to your attention in regards to the 20 million, I know that the process that you're going through, your office is going through, and our finance staff, that you were going to have a look at it around the process to see what would be made fairer, because we all know how many shares were from the legacy Auckland City Council. So, I mean, we can't just do the basic split 10 million to Auckland City Council and 10 million to Manukau City Council. That's unfair, but there needs to be a process put in place. And that's because there's shares that Auckland City Council put in. I think at the time, and I stand corrected, Councillor Fletcher, but I think it was about 12.5%. I think Manukau was about 10. So we just need to be fair to the old legacy councils that we were representing, that we need to have a process around how that $20 million is split. If we go back to our territorial local authorities, for example, in Manukau, we had Manurewa Community Board, we had Otara, we had Papatoe, we had Mangere, no, Clendon, Clevedon, sorry, I thought, geez, Clevedon, yeah, I mean, Howick, yes, we had all those, and then we had the community boards in Auckland City. So, Mr. Mayor, my plea again to you is, let's have a look at that process and just really have a look to see whether $20 million out of the 1.2 billion is really a good idea, because I know there are so many legacy projects in our areas, both our areas, that need funding. We have Manukau Sports Bowl, $10 million is required. But look, I just want to sort of put a plea again. Let's have a look at the process. I believe, and the 2 local boards believe, 20 million is not sufficient for what we put in. And my last point is just to you, Sharon, and I remember twice now you and I ended up moving and seconding a recommendation, I think it was 2012 and 2013. I stand corrected, but there were 2 recommendations we put forward for the legacy councils to end up getting the dividend put to Auckland City Council and Manukau City Council, and both of them failed. But look, in regards to the fund, we've made the decision. And so, look, for me, this is the only thing now for me is the 20 million. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor. I mean, the 20 million is in the first year's thing coming ahead. So I take it that you support getting on with it. Otherwise, we won't have a 20 million. Good on you. Thank you very much for that. Deputy Mayor Simpson, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to be very succinct. I mean, this paper is really about noting the progress that we are making from when we made the decision to do this to where we are today. And I just want to thank everyone involved, including those who appointed the 3 directors on working promptly and getting us to this place. And I also want to commend the people who put together the legislative process, because that is the protection. That is your intergenerational protection. And so I just, as I said, lots of people have talked about the good, bad and the reasons around it. We've made that decision. This is about how we're getting on to do it. So I support your work, Councillor Fletcher. I think you've done a great job. And Your Worship, I think this is a very positive way forward. I can't wait for that legislative protection to be put in place, but very, very pleased with the progress update. Thank you.
That we even have the MP for who's doing it, who's underway. Okay. Councillor Newman.
Yes, good afternoon, Your Worship. Look, very briefly, I also want to express my thanks to Councillor Fletcher in particular for leading the recruitment process. There'll be announcements, I'm sure, shortly. I think that they are very good. I also, and it's been said, acknowledge that she's worked collaboratively, in particular with Member David Taipari, and I think that that's been very helpful. I do hope that we will support the directors to be able to exercise their good judgment in relation to the advice and the Treasury and the investment management services that they need to determine, not the officers. They need to do that, and they will, which I think is good. I acknowledge the consistency of the advocacy from my colleagues from the Manukau Ward, Councillor Filipaina and Councillor Foley. They have been consistent about this right from the beginning. I think it's a credit to them. Perfectly comfortable if people change their position. I think that my colleagues from Manukau on this issue are wrong, but I accept that they have a position and it's an established one. I do, however, want to express my hope that we will be able to get some clarity soon in relation to how this process, if it's a contested process, the criteria, the identification of the priorities. Look, I've got a local board in Manarewa that has two options for an investment proposal at War Memorial Park that they want to have socialised with your office, your worship, where the board wishes to put up some of the funding that it will receive as part of FAIRA funding, to put that back in to complement what could be an investment pathway if we can get a share of that $20 million for that project. And that would be partnered up with some funding, I'm sure, from some philanthropic providers on the proviso that we can get some of that funding, and that the rules will allow for funding to be by way of third-party grant to do the construction. I think it is important that, and I know that nothing's been determined yet, so we don't actually have the $20 million, but there will be a need to get pace into this because there is a desire for it. But this is a noting report on progress, Your Worship, and I happen to think this is an excellent piece of work, and I'm very keen to see it progress, with the proviso that the directors ultimately are empowered to make these decisions in relation to the advice they receive and the management services that will need to be procured. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. First you get your 20 million, but you're right. We will obviously have a debate about that at some stage or other, probably a workshop followed by a punch-up. No, that was a joke. I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to have one of those. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, the first point I'd make is I certainly agree with Councillor Filipaina. The other legacy councils were very quick to hock off their airport shares and got whatever little bit of money they got when they, hardly hold on for them to 2 seconds. So I think there should be a more equitable response to those particular councils who have done the Auckland super city so well by retaining those shares for for the best part of 14 years. This is a report on the Future Fund establishment update, and as it says at point 5 here, elected members, and I hope Aucklanders realise this, any decisions about selling the airport shares now have well and truly gone beyond the hands of elected people. It's over to these directors who will appear on the scene shortly. There's not much point relitigating things, but I think that there's certainly there is a point in just putting things into context that goes to both this paper and the information we've got, because it really does depend on who's telling the story. It wasn't even 3 years ago with the last mayor. There was a mayor before this one, the last mayor, and he wasn't exactly averse to selling off public assets, but he certainly drew the line at the Auckland Airport shares, didn't even get off the ground. And I remember very clearly the workshop, one of the workshops, where Mr. Goff emphatically and expeditiously dismissed the proposal, along with those who were acting as its proponents. basically on the basis that given there was no shortage of eager buyers, which turned out to be the case in the first lot of airport shares, why would you consider getting rid of such a university acclaimed high quality investment? And that's where I just want to put on the record for some of the councillors who have been speaking on this, that shareholder returns went up from 70 million in 2011 to 2.471 billion in 2019. That was an increase of 2.4 billion in returns made up of capital growth and dividends in just 8 years. So if this future fund does as well as that, well, we'll be very lucky people. I somehow suspect it won't. The only other comment I really wanted to really remark on, Mr. Mayor, was the one made by one of the previous speakers referring about us now having these professional advice, which is part of the paper here of these, either the trustees or the manager, and the manager who will be rewarded rather handsomely, I would just add in passing. But how we're going to benefit now because we have got this professional advice? Well, at risk of repeating the past, the Auckland Council Investments had directors who had considerable commercial investment expertise, and they posted record returns to ratepayers in respect to those investments, particularly in the last year. Sometimes it was 18%. The average was 10%. That didn't help them. They got dissolved. The fund got sold off. The directors got the boot, and it was gone. Slightly longer term than Councillor Lee referred to, but very expeditiously as well. So for those people making the reference to returns, making the reference to the benefits of professionalism and appointed directors, we've been down that path before. So, there's any number of old sayings about, repeating the past, and I guess, the hopeless optimistic would hope this goes down another line. I think experience tells us that it doesn't and it won't.
On that cheerful note, I'll put the vote. All those
Your Worship, just in conclusion, I want to thank everyone. It is a noting report today. It is there to keep you informed on where things are at. I have a measure of sympathy with those who are frustrated at the loss of some of the assets that we have had. But I would really draw their attention to the papers that were circulated on the 27th of June. What is different here, and what I feel entirely comfortable with, the draft legislation that we have, which is the role that these directors in the future and the responsibility that will be defined in legislation to maintain the real value of the capital of the Auckland Future Fund. So this is going to be an opportunity to win some, hopefully, trust back by Aucklanders. It might be a different investment, but there will be the real value that is there that will be required by future councils, that will be required by future generations. And I would have no difficulty with B being seeking legislative protection of the Auckland Future Fund for future generations, because that is what this is about. And this is the marked difference between what came before and the cynicism that many of us felt, especially after Auckland Council Investments Limited was dissolved, and the lack of safeguards at that time. This has a trust deed, it has legislation. This is something that you will be able to look back and feel proud of. So I want to ensure that we will be reporting back to you on a regular basis. The detail is taking a little bit of time, and it's good to have Phil here now. I've been grateful for the support that we've had with Hakura and with David Tapari as we've worked our way towards this. But we have made mistakes in the past. But I believe we've learnt the lessons from that, and this is the product that we have now that will secure in some way going forward. So thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I'm going to put this, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you very much. It was a noting report. So, on to this item 16, committee structure. We've